Today we shall be looking at endotracheal tubes or ET tubes, various types of endotracheal tubes, the parts of an ET tube, the care and interventions that we provide to patients who have been intubated. An endotracheal tube is used to maintain a patent airway, and they are always indicated when a mechanical ventilation is required. If a client requires an artificial airway for longer than 10 to 14 days, a tracheostomy may be created instead so that to avoid mucosal and vocal cord damage, which can be caused by an endotracheal tube. Looking at the parts of an endotracheal tube, we have a cuff, a pilot balloon, a universal adapter, depth marker, the internal diameter, Murphy's eye, and lastly a bevel. A cuff is located at the distal end of the tube, and when inflated, it seals the trachea to prevent any aspiration and ensures the delivery of a set tidal volume when mechanical ventilation is used. This cuff is also used to prevent air from passing into the vocal cords, the nose, or back to the mouth. Another part is known as a pilot balloon. This pilot balloon allows air to be inserted into the cuff, preventing air from escaping, and helps to determine the presence or an absence of air in the cuff. Then we have a universal adapter, which connects the tube to the mechanical ventilation tubing or other oxygen delivery systems that we are going to use in these intubated patients. We have a depth marker that helps us know how deep we have inserted the endotracheal tube, and the internal diameter is a marking that highlights the size of the internal diameter of a specific tube that we're going to use. We have two main routes of intubation, that is the orotracheal intubation and nasotracheal intubation. In orotracheal intubation, the tube is inserted through the mouth, allowing the use of a larger diameter tube and reducing the work of breathing. This route is indicated when the client has a nasal obstruction or has a predisposing epistaxis. It is quite uncomfortable and can be manipulated by the tongue, causing an airway obstruction. An oral airway or a Guedel airway may be needed to keep the client from biting on the tube. The second route of intubation is the nasotracheal intubation. In nasotracheal intubation, a tube is inserted through the nostril, requiring us to use a smaller tube, which increases resistance and the client's work of breathing. This method of intubation is inserted blindly without visualizing the larynx, as compared to orotracheal intubation, where we use a laryngoscope. Nasotracheal intubation is avoided in patients who have bleeding disorders, and it's only reserved for the cases where orotracheal intubation is not possible, for example in patients with unstable cervical spine injury, dental abscess, or epiglottitis. How do we confirm correct placement of our endotracheal tube? We can confirm correct tube placement through the use of an End-Tidal carbon dioxide detector. This CO2 detector is used to confirm the presence of exhaled carbon dioxide from the lungs. It is usually placed between the bag valve mask and an endotracheal tube. A respiratory therapist looks for the color change whenever there is carbon dioxide detected during exhalation. The second method of confirming correct tube placement is the use of auscultation method. We auscultate both sides of the chest while manually ventilating with a resuscitation bag or an ambu bag. During auscultation, an absence of breath sounds or absence of chest wall movement on the left side may suggest that there's a right mainstream bronchus intubation. We auscultate the stomach as well to rule out esophageal intubation, and if a tube is incorrectly placed in the stomach, breath sounds will be louder over the stomach than they are at the chest, and then abdominal distension may be visible. The third way that we can confirm tube placement is through the radiographic confirmation. During radiographic confirmation, we use a chest X-ray to confirm that the tube is in the correct position. The correct position is usually 1 to 2 centimeters above the carina. It is important to always keep the resuscitation bag at the bedside of the client with an endotracheal tube or a tracheostomy tube available so that we can provide immediate ventilatory support in case it's needed. After confirming correct tube placement, we then secure the tube with an adhesive tape immediately after intubation. We monitor the tube's position at the lip or at the nose and regularly assess for the skin and mucous membrane changes. We suction the tube only when it's needed. And lastly, we move the orotracheal tube to the opposite side of the mouth daily so that we can prevent pressure injuries, necrosis on the lips and the mouth, nerve damage, and as well to allow inspection and cleaning of the mouth. Repositioning of this endotracheal tube to the opposite side of the mouth must be performed by 2 trained healthcare personnel. Lastly, what are the care interventions that we provide for patients who are being intubated? We always prevent pulling, tugging, or accidental dislodgement of the tube, and you be aware that suctioning or coughing of the client and attempts to speak by the client places the extra stress on the tube and increases the risk of dislodgement. You need to assess the pilot balloon regularly to ensure that the cuff remains inflated. And we maintain cuff inflation to create a proper seal, preventing aspiration and allowing full mechanical ventilation. Another intervention is to monitor the cuff pressure at least every 8 hours. Cuff pressures should be maintained between 20 to 30 centimeters of water or 15 to 22 millimeters of mercury. We use a minimal leak and occlusive techniques to check and maintain a proper cuff pressure. What is a minimal leak and what is an occlusive technique that we use to maintain this proper cuff pressure? A minimal leak technique is used for cuff inflation and checking of the cuff pressures for any cuffs without pressure relief valves. You inflate a cuff until the seal is established, which is when there is no harsh sound heard through a stethoscope when it's placed over the trachea, and when the client breathes in, slightly deflate the cuff until a small air leak is heard at peak inspiration. During this technique, the client cannot make any verbal sounds and there is no air felt coming out of the client's mouth. We use occlusive technique when checking for cuff inflation and cuff pressure checking in cuffs which have pressure relief valves. This technique provides an adequate seal in the trachea at the lowest possible cuff pressure. It uses the same procedure as minimal leak technique without an air leak. And lastly, once our patient has received all the therapy that requires intubation, we need to extubate the patient at the right time. During extubation, you first hyperoxygenate the patient with 100% oxygen, then suction the endotracheal tube and the oral cavity. At that point, you place the client in a semi-follows position and deflate the cuff, have the client inhale, and at peak inspiration, remove the tube, suctioning the airway through the tube while you're pulling it out. After removal of this endotracheal tube, instruct the client to cough and take a deep breath to assist in removing any accumulated secretions in the throat. You need to have a client say their name so that you are able to assess vocalization, and you need to assess for stridor, which could be caused by laryngoedema. This assessment of stridor can be done by auscultating over the trachea. If present, you notify the primary healthcare provider immediately. And then you need to monitor for respiratory difficulty and inform the client that hoarseness of sound or a sore throat is normal and will subside over time.